Imagine, a tiny mountain mammal perfectly engineered by evolution to survive a brutal 9-month alpine winter.
Right.
But then it faces lethal danger on a perfectly mild 78-degree summer afternoon. Or picture yourself standing on a jagged mountain peak looking down and realizing the rocks beneath your hiking boots are literally a billion years older than the dinosaur fossils buried 50 miles below them.
Yeah, it completely shatters your baseline understanding of how the natural world is actually supposed to work. I mean, it defies logic.
It really does. Welcome to today's deep dive. If you're listening to this, you are likely preparing to visit Glacier National Park. Or maybe you're just, deeply curious about an ecosystem that is so full of paradoxes.
Exactly. And our mission today is to take a standard vacation itinerary and elevate it into a true masterclass for you.
Yeah, we want to arm you with the pragmatic logistics to navigate the park, the geological context to understand what you're even looking at, and the insider secrets to experience the landscape away from the heavy crowds.
And we are pulling from an incredibly rich stack of sources to do this. We're looking at the brand new 2026 Park Operations Manual, recent structural geology assessments, Indigenous history archives, and some very sobering ecological field reports that just came out.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before you can contemplate a billion years of geology, you have to actually get your car through the entrance gate.
True. Always the hardest part, right?
Yeah. And reading through this 2026 operations manual, the entire paradigm of how we access this park has been flipped completely on its head.
It has. So the 5-year pilot program for those pre-booked vehicle reservations in the primary valleys, that's dead.
Wow.
Just gone.
Just gone. If you're rolling up to Many Glacier, Two Medicine, or the North Fork, the era of needing a timed entry pass months in advance is over. You pull up, you show your standard national park pass, and you just drive in.
Which, I mean, sounds incredibly liberating on paper.
It does, but looking at the traffic data, I have to assume that just pushes the bottleneck further up the mountain, right? Everyone is going to flood the Going to the Sun Road and aim straight for the Logan Pass Visitor Center.
You nailed it. And that is exactly where the 2026 manual drops the hammer. From July 1st through September 7th, Logan Pass now operates under a strict 3-hour parking limit.
Wait, really? 3 hours?
Yep. And it is enforced 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you find a spot, you have to immediately walk to a physical kiosk, print a free time-stamped permit, and display it on your dashboard. They are aggressively forcing parking turnover.
3 hours barely gives you enough time to, use the restroom, look at the visitor center, and maybe jog up the 2.7-mile Hidden Lake Overlook Trail.
Barely, yeah.
So what if I want to hike the iconic Highline Trail all the way to Granite Park Chalet? I mean, that's a 7.6-mile trek one way. The park is essentially telling me I can't park at Logan Pass to do that hike.
You cannot. You absolutely cannot. And that is the crux of the 2026 strategy. If you want to do those long-haul alpine hikes originating from the pass, you're required to use the new Ticketed Express shuttle system.
Okay, so we're just trading valley reservations for shuttle reservations.
Precisely. Between July 1st and September 7th, any passenger 2 years or older needs a reserved ticket to board the shuttle. The system charges a $1 processing fee, and you do this via recreation.gov.
Got it.
And these are express routes, right? Departing from lower elevation hubs like the Apgar Transit Center and the St. Mary Visitor Center running direct to Logan Pass.
I did notice a massive red flag in the manual, though, for anyone trying to stop along the way. These 2026 express shuttles completely bypass Avalanche Creek and the Trail of the Cedars.
Yeah, that's a huge catch.
If you're standing there waiting for a pickup, they will blow right past you.
They will not stop. And drivers absolutely will not let you board without that pre-purchased ticket. Now, as for securing those tickets, park management releases a small batch 60 days in advance, starting in early May. But the critical window for you, the listener, is the next day release.
Right, the scramble.
Oh, yeah. The vast majority of the inventory drops at 7:00 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time the night before you want to ride, so you need to have the app open, logged in, and refreshing frantically at 6:59 p.m.
And we should probably also factor in the physical friction of just getting to the region this year. The Kalispell Airport FCA is undertaking a major runway closure in July 2026.
Oh, that's going to cause headaches.
Massive ones. They are shutting down the tarmac midweek from Monday at 6:00 p.m. to Friday at 10:00 a.m. for 4 consecutive weeks.
Wow. So travelers flying in on like a Tuesday or Wednesday will find themselves entirely grounded if they don't reroute through Missoula or Great Falls.
Exactly. And for late-season travelers, the inside North Fork Road toward Logging Creek shuts down completely on October 4, 2026 for water main construction.
It is a dizzying amount of hyper-modern, down-to-the-minute scheduling.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's wild to think about visitors meticulously planning their 7:00 p.m. shuttle tickets down to the millisecond, refreshing their screens just to go look at rocks that haven't cared about the concept of time for over a billion years.
That is quite the contrast.
Right. Which brings us to the literal foundation of the park. The rock you are standing on at Logan Pass is part of the Belt Supergroup, clocking in at 1.4 to 1.5 billion years old.
Yeah, or the Purcell supergroup, if you happen to be looking at a Canadian geological map. We're talking about a sedimentary sequence that is over 15 kilometers thick in some places.
15 kilometers.
Yeah, it formed at the bottom of a massive, shallow inland sea during the Proterozoic eon.
Now, the structural geology assessments point out a fascinating quirk about this specific rock. The sediment was laid down before the Cambrian period, meaning there was absolutely zero, quote, bioturbation.
Right, biotubation. That's just the churning of sediment by living organisms.
Mhm.
So worms burrowing, insects digging, creatures shuffling through the mud.
I love this concept so much. Because those multicellular burrowing invertebrates hadn't even evolved yet, there was nothing to disturb the seafloor.
Nothing at all.
It's like finding a billion-year-old photograph of a raindrop or a mud crack perfectly preserved in the stone because there were no prehistoric worms around to photobomb or mess up the wet sediment.
That's a great way to put it. The mud simply settled, dried, and petrified in complete silence. And because it's so pristine, the stratigraphy, the distinct layers of rock, acts as this visual timeline of the Earth's shifting atmosphere.
You can literally read the chemistry of the ancient world just by looking at the colors of the mountainsides. Let's decode those colors because they look like a massive geological layer cake.
They really do.
At the base, you have the Alton Formation. It's this brilliant, gleaming, white dolostone cliff.
Yeah.
If you get up close, it is packed with stromatolites, which are fossilized mats of primitive blue-green algae.
Yeah, and then sitting right above that white base is the Apakuni Formation, which is characterized by a deep, striking green color. But the green wasn't the original color of the mud. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, as the sediment was buried under miles of additional rock, the immense heat and pressure triggered a process called deep burial metamorphism. So in a very low oxygen environment, that primitive clay was crushed and cooked into a new mineral called chlorite, which gives it that green hue.
But then, resting directly on top of that green layer is the Grinnell Formation, which is a vivid, rusty red. And the geology reports note something incredibly counterintuitive here.
Right, about the iron.
Yeah. The green Apakuni and the red Grinnell contain the exact same amount of iron, which is less than 3%.
It's fascinating. The difference is entirely atmospheric. By the time the Grinnell mud was being deposited, primitive life forms had pumped significantly more oxygen into the Earth's atmosphere.
So it basically rusted.
Exactly. That tiny percentage of iron in the mud was exposed to the oxygen and heavily oxidized. It essentially rusted in place before it hardened into rock.
So you were hiking through the timeline of the Great Oxidation Event. But I want to dig into a glaring structural paradox here.
Okay, let's hear it. If the Belt Supergroup is a billion years old, it should be the basement of the continent. But if you drive to the eastern edge of the park and look at Chief Mountain, this ancient rock is sitting right on top of 70-million-year-old Cretaceous rock from the dinosaur era. It's completely upside down.
Right, you're pointing to the Lewis overthrust, which is the defining geological mechanism of the entire region. Between 59 and 75 million years ago, a mountain-building event called the Laramide orogeny occurred.
Okay.
The tectonic plates collided with just unimaginable compressional force.
The best way to visualize compressional force is to imagine pushing a thick area rug across a slippery hardwood floor. If you push from one end, the rug eventually buckles, folds over itself, and slides on top of its own fabric.
That is exactly what the Earth's crust did. The force shoved a massive wedge of that billion-year-old Precambrian rock up an incline and slid it 50 miles eastward, directly over the younger, softer Cretaceous plains.
That is mind-blowing.
And then millions of years of subsequent glacial erosion carved away the surrounding stone, leaving behind isolated, towering blocks of that ancient thrust sheet. Geologists call these isolated remnants cliffs, and Chief Mountain is one of the most prominent cliffs in the world.
Chief Mountain isn't just a structural anomaly, though, right?
All right.
It's a profound cultural touchstone. The indigenous history documents detail how this specific peak and the dramatic spine of the Continental Divide have been a spiritual sanctuary for over 10,000 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Amscabi Picani, the Blackfeet Nation, refer to these mountains as the backbone of the world.
And the Eastern Plains and the Rocky Mountain Front are traditional Blackfeet territory, while the western forested valleys were stewarded by the Salish Kuspe and Sanka peoples, who are now unified as the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes.
I was deeply struck by the traditional storytelling protocols tied to this landscape. There are very strict rules regarding oral histories, specifically coyote stories. The protocol dictates that coyote stories are never to be told during the warm months, from April through October.
The underlying mechanism of that rule is rooted in a profound respect for the active living environment.
Right, because when the earth is warm, the spirits of the natural world, the animals, and the landscape are awake and active. The stories themselves carry immense power and weight.
Yeah, so to tell them in the summer is to disrupt and disrespect that active natural balance. You wait until the first heavy winter snowfall, when the earth goes dormant and the spirits are asleep, to safely share those narratives, and you must cease entirely by the time spring arrives.
It's a philosophy of total integration with the landscape, which, sadly, makes the subsequent history of the park's creation incredibly fraught. In 1895, under severe economic starvation policies enforced by the federal government, Blackfeet leaders, including Chief Whitecalf, authorized the sale of an 800,000-acre mountain strip for $1.5 million.
But the vital stipulation in that 1895 agreement was that the Blackfeet retain their de jure rights to hunt, fish, and harvest timber on that land, so long as it remained public property. However, when the federal government formally established Glacier National Park in 1910, they unilaterally nullified those tribal usage rights. They argued that a national park was a distinct entity, separate from standard public land.
And the courts backed them up, didn't they?
Yeah, the U.S. Court of Claims later validated that federal position in 1935. Though today, park administrators are finally actively collaborating with tribal leaders to integrate these original indigenous narratives back into the park's educational framework.
While the federal government was nullifying those rights in 1910, another massive force was reshaping the physical footprint of the park: the Great Northern Railway.
Oh yeah, the railroad era.
Louis W. Hill, the president of the railway, launched an aggressive campaign called See America First. He wanted to siphon tourist dollars away from European vacations, so he aggressively branded Glacier as the Switzerland of America.
And he mandated a very specific Swiss chalet architectural style for the park's infrastructure. We're talking steep, gabled roofs, heavy timber framing, wide eaves. The crown jewel of this effort was the Glacier Park Lodge, built in 1913 at the Eastern Gateway.
The lobby of that lodge is just ridiculous. It's supported by colonnades of unpeeled, old-growth Douglas fir logs, each 40 feet tall. They required entire rail cars to transport.
That's insane.
And because the building is over a century old, it houses some incredibly bizarre historical quirks. Deep inside, there's a decommissioned baggage elevator completely covered in decades of signatures from bellhops and workers.
Oh, wow. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. There's an annex basement filled with eerie, discarded vintage hotel artifacts. And just outside the park, boundaries on Blackfeet land, off Looking Glass Road, sits the Looking Glass Graveyard, holding the remains of early pioneers.
These massive timber lodges project a feeling of absolute permanence. But the recent ecological field reports paint a terrifyingly fragile picture of the environment surrounding them. The park is currently warming 1.8 times faster than the global average.
Wow. And the 2025 data on Sperry Glacier shows it recorded its second highest mass loss since monitoring began in 2005. The snowpack arrived a full month late, followed by exceptionally dry, hot summer winds.
Right, and that vanishing snowpack directly threatens the American pika, which brings us back to the paradox we mentioned at the start of the deep dive.
Pika.
Yeah, the pika is completely reliant on a hyper-fast baseline metabolism to survive 9 months of alpine winter without hibernating. They maintain a core body temperature of 104 degrees Fahrenheit.
That is so hot.
Combine that internal furnace with incredibly dense fur and the insulation of deep winter snow, and they thrive in sub-zero conditions.
But when you remove the snowpack and crank up the summer heat, that survival mechanism turns lethal, doesn't it? Because their fur is so efficient at trapping heat, they can't vent their own metabolic output.
Exactly. The data shows that an ambient outdoor temperature of just 78 degrees Fahrenheit can cause a pika to lethally overheat in just 30 minutes.
30 minutes, that's heartbreaking.
Their maximum tolerable body temperature is 109 degrees, so they literally bake from the inside out on a pleasant summer afternoon. Citizen science surveys tracking talus slopes since 2008 confirm a steady, undeniable decline in pika occupancy as they are forced to migrate higher and higher up the mountains to escape the heat.
Until they simply run out of mountain.
Right.
And the high-elevation forests are facing a similar cascading failure. The white bark pine, which is a threatened species, is being decimated by an introduced Eurasian fungus called white pine blister rust.
Yeah, the blister rust causes lethal cankers that cut off the tree's nutrient flow, but the secondary consequence is how it destroys a vital mutualistic relationship with a local bird, the Clark's nutcracker.
Tell me about the nutcracker, because this behavioral shift is wild.
So, historically, the tree produces large, wingless seeds, and the nutcracker relies on them for food, burying caches of seeds across the mountain. The forgotten caches grow into the next generation of pines.
But the trees are dying so fast that the seeds are becoming incredibly scarce. And the nutcrackers are highly intelligent, so they recognize the scarcity.
Yeah, they adapt.
Right, so instead of acting as seed dispersers and burying them for later, the birds have shifted behavior entirely. They are now seed predators, consuming whatever seeds they find immediately to survive. The entire reproductive cycle of the forest is basically broken down.
It's dire. But the park is currently executing a $106,550 intervention project, sending arborists into the canopy to harvest cones from the few rust-resistant survivor trees. They're hoping to replant them in burn zones and engineer a resilient genetic refuge.
And we are seeing that same aggressive level of ecological stewardship happening underwater, too. Glacier streams feed three of North America's major river basins. They evolved as pristine sanctuaries for native West Slope cutthroat trout and threatened bull trout.
But between 1912 and 1972, humanity introduced millions of non-native sport fish brook, rainbow, and lake trout into the waterways.
Just for fishing, basically.
Right. And the introduction of lake trout on the west side of the Continental Divide was catastrophic. The native bull trout spawn biennially every 2 years. The invasive lake trout spawn annually, mature faster, and predate on the native fish.
It's totally unbalanced.
Yeah, in under 3 decades, native bull trout populations collapsed in primary ecosystems like Logging Lake and Lake McDonald.
The situation at Logging Lake actually became so dire that park managers initiated a literal rescue operation. Have you read about this?
The backpack thing, right?
Yes. They hiked in, captured the remaining juvenile bull trout, and physically transported them in specialized backpacks to a secure, fishless alpine lake located above an impassable waterfall.
That's incredible.
Yeah, they used the natural geology as a fortress to keep the invasive lake trout out.
Meanwhile, on the eastern slopes at Gunsight Lake, the threat isn't predation, but hybridization. Introduced rainbow trout are interbreeding with the native West Slope cutthroat trout, basically erasing the native genome entirely.
So, to stop this genetic extinction, the park just approved a $24,000 project to apply rotenone, which is a naturally derived fish toxicant, directly to Gunsight Lake. The rotenone inhibits cellular respiration in the gills, effectively clearing out the entire hybridized population.
It's a hard reset.
Exactly. Once the lake neutralizes, they will restock it with pure native species, creating a secure, high-elevation climate refuge.
When you combine all of this, the sheer scale of the geology, the depth of the indigenous protocols, and the desperate fragility of the modern ecosystem, it demands a completely different approach to how you physically explore the park.
It really does. It completely changes the calculus of your trip.
Yeah.
So let's pivot to the insider's guide. How do you take this newly informed perspective out into the landscape, avoid the Logan Pass shuttle bottleneck, and experience the real crown of the continent?
Let's look at how to tackle the iconic experiences through an insider's lens.
Okay, if you visit during the spring, before the Going to the Sun Road opens to vehicular traffic, you can cycle it. The 16.1-mile climb from Avalanche Creek up to Logan Pass is a grueling physical test. But the sensory experience is unparalleled. You're grinding up the tarmac with no engine noise, just the sound of your own breathing and the rush of the melting snowpack cascading down the weeping walls.
That sounds amazing.
It is. Then there's the Iceberg Lake Polar Plunge. You hike 9.3 miles round trip from the mini glacier valley into a towering glacial cirque, strip down, and jump into water that literally has ice floes floating in it in mid-August.
I can't even imagine. The physiological shock of that water has to be intense.
Oh, absolutely.
But for hikers tackling the Grinnell Glacier Trail, a really pragmatic insider move is booking the historic wooden boat tour across Swift Current Lake and Lake Josephine. It physically shaves 4 strenuous miles off your round-trip hike, preserving your energy for the steep alpine ascent.
Such a good tip. But to truly get off the beaten path, we need to talk about the hidden gems. My personal favorite is the Two Medicine Area Overlook. It sits on an unmarked, rough dirt pull-off, just before the pass on Looking Glass Road. It provides a sweeping, high-elevation panorama of the entire Two Medicine Basin.
The critical caveat for that overlook, though, is that it sits outside the park boundary on sovereign Blackfeet tribal land.
Yes, very important.
Accessing it requires purchasing a Blackfeet tribal recreation permit. It is a vital exercise in respecting tribal sovereignty and land management.
Definitely. Now, if you are looking for a hike that doesn't even exist on the official park maps, look up the Dragon's Tail Scramble. It departs from the Logan Pass area but quickly veers off onto a knife-edge ridge high above Hidden Lake. You're navigating sheer drop-offs with virtually zero foot traffic.
Not for the faint of heart.
Nope. Or if you possess strong off-trail navigation skills, local guides swear by the trail-free isolation of Margaret Lake or Shangri-La Lake, which sits entirely hidden on the shoulder of Mount Wilbur.
We should also highlight profound experiences that don't require scaling a mountain, though.
Very true. The evening wildlife cruise along Camas Road is spectacular. Most tourists just use Camas as a high-speed transit corridor during the day. But if you drive it at a crawl at dusk, scanning the wetlands and burned scars, your chances of encountering foraging black bears and moose are incredibly high.
And for cultural immersion, the sources highlight some amazing off-park indigenous experiences.
Yes, this is my absolute top recommendation. Head up near Bab and book an indigenous foraging workshop led by Mariah Gladstone of Indige Kitchen. You spend the day walking in the landscape, learning to identify and forage native service berries and fireweed, and you end the experience eating a traditional meal of elk and wild rice stuffed peppers.
That sounds incredible.
It connects you directly to the 10,000-year human history of the ecosystem in a way a visitor center plaque never ever could.
And, when the sheer density of the glacier crowds becomes overwhelming, look to the broader region. You can drive west into the Kootenai National Forest to stand in the silent ancient cathedral of the 1,000-year-old Ross Creek Cedars. Or head south to the shores of Flathead Lake and walk through the Purple Mountain Lavender Farm.
We have covered a massive amount of terrain today. You now know the precise mechanics of the 2026 Logan Pass shuttle strategy. You know how to read the oxidized iron history of a 1.5 billion-year-old inland sea.
Yep.
You understand the tragic metabolic trap of the American pika, the cultural weight of a winter coyote story, and the quiet, off-trail secrets hidden in the high country. You aren't just checking off a vacation packing list anymore. You're fully equipped to step into this landscape as a true insider.
But as you finalize those travel plans, I want to leave you with one final lingering question to ponder long after this deep dive ends. When you finally make that hike and you stand atop the Continental Divide looking out at a glacier that might not exist in a decade, consider this. How will our relationship to these landscapes and the very definition of a national park have to change when the defining features they were named after vanish completely?